The moment the laptop flickered to life, her hand trembled. It was a small thing, but the hesitation stretched as she stared at the screen. What was she expecting? She didn't know. The ad had been simple: used laptop for sale, works perfectly. A minor transaction, the kind that happens every day, one she'd never think twice about. She clicked the file, a file named 2024-417. A video began to play. Static first, then the grainy image of a room, the color drained from it, like an old photograph. It wasn't the quality that made her throat close, though. It was the man standing there, a figure she knew too well. His face had aged, hardened, but it was him. The last thing she expected was to see him again. Alive. On the screen. Breathing. Her heart skipped a beat as the image shifted. There was someone else in the room, their face obscured, but their hands. The image zoomed in, focusing on a delicate piece of jewelry, the one she had given away years ago. The voice of the man, low and raspy, echoed faintly, but she could barely make out the words. Was he speaking to her? No, it couldn't be. This was too much. No, this was wrong. The laptop whirred loudly, as if it too had recognized the error. And then, just like that, the screen went black. She stared at the lifeless monitor, disbelief sweeping over her. No, this wasn't real. There was no way this was real. She shut the laptop, her hands now slick with sweat, her mind racing in 1,000 directions. Who was selling this laptop? And why had they left it there, untouched? She felt a cold sweat drip down her neck. She didn't want to know. She couldn't. The truth was beginning to shift in her, like the earth slipping from under her feet. The feeling of being watched, of being followed. She wanted to forget. She didn't want to know where it was headed. But the images, those shadows, they clung to her. They followed her out of the room and into the hallway, even though she tried to shut it all out. The laptop's cold surface burned in her mind. She had to open it again. She didn't know why. Just check the rest. It's probably nothing. Maybe a glitch, an old file, something left behind. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, unwilling to move, as if the device itself had turned into something sinister. But she opened it anyway. The file was still there, still staring back at her like a mirror. This time she didn't hesitate. She clicked again. The screen blinked back to life, but the video was different now. A woman. The woman's face was partially obscured, but her eyes were wide, frantic. The same room, the same dark tones, the same static. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew that woman. That was her, wasn't it? No. It couldn't be. She stared, unable to look away. Her own reflection flickered in the screen as the woman moved, trapped. Her chest tightened. This was real. This wasn't a mistake. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls were inching closer with every breath. Every glance at the screen sent a shiver through her spine. The woman on the screen didn't move much, her eyes darting anxiously across the room. But there was something in her gaze. Something desperate. Something pleading. It was as if she was trying to speak, but the words couldn't reach her. The image was warped, distorted by static and glitches, but it was clear enough. The woman's movements were slow, as if she was being controlled, forced into stillness by something unseen. The camera panned slowly, revealing a part of the room that had been hidden before. The shadows deepened. Her heart raced as the woman's eyes met the camera, and it was as if she knew she was being watched. No. This was a mistake. She needed to shut it off. She had to. But her fingers wouldn't obey. The screen flickered again. She slammed the laptop shut. Enough. This had gone too far. But even with the screen dark, she could feel the weight of it, pressing down on her chest. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She had to leave. But where could she go? Her thoughts spun like a hurricane, whipping up fragments of memories she couldn't make sense of. There were things she hadn't thought about in years, things she had buried deep. Was it possible? Could this be connected? She ran her fingers through her hair, her mind unraveling. This wasn't supposed to happen. The laptop was supposed to be an ordinary purchase. It was supposed to be a simple, useful tool, a way to get by. And yet, here she was. The room felt too small. The air thickened. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that woman's face, staring out from the screen. Desperate. Watching. Waiting. Her mind kept spiraling back to that moment. The one where the woman's eyes had locked with hers, desperate, pleading for help. But it was too late. She couldn't go back now. She had seen something she wasn't supposed to see. And then the thought hit her. What if the woman was trying to send a message? What if the video wasn't just a random clip, some leftover file? No. Wow. It wasn't. She reached for the laptop again, a tremble in her hand. The dark thoughts swirled around her as she opened the device once more, her breath catching. The screen blinked to life. But there was nothing there this time. Just blackness. Not again. The silence of the room was oppressive, thickening around her with each passing moment. She sat there, the laptop now closed, her fingers pressing against the cool metal of the desk as if trying to steady herself. The air felt like it was pressing against her chest, tight, suffocating. Every corner of her mind screamed at her to walk away, to put the laptop down and never look back. But she couldn't. Something about the image of that woman, her frantic eyes, her trapped posture, gnawed at her like a splinter working its way under her skin. Why did she recognize her? How could this person, who seemed like a stranger, affect her so deeply? She tried to think, but each thought led to more confusion, more anxiety. Was this some cruel coincidence? No. This wasn't just a coincidence. She couldn't shake the feeling that everything about this was deliberate. She ran her hands through her hair again, the weight of the decision pressing down harder. She was about to cross a line she couldn't come back from. She couldn't resist anymore. The images haunted her, every corner of her mind crowded with that woman's face. She grabbed the laptop again, opened it slowly. It felt heavier this time, as if it was reluctant to reveal its secrets. The screen blinked back to life, but there was no file this time. No video. But then there it was. A new file appeared. It was unmarked, just a string of numbers. 2024, 418. Her breath caught in her throat. She clicked on it, heart pounding in her chest. The video began to play. The same static, the same low, disorienting hum. But this time, the room was different. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse. And there, standing in the center, was the same man. The one from before. But now, there was something new. Beside him stood the woman. But this time she wasn't trapped. She was free. Her face was calm, and there was a glimmer in her eyes. A promise. Something was different. The video clicked off abruptly. The silence in the room became deafening. The screen flickered and went black. She didn't know how long she sat there, staring at the darkened screen, her heart thudding in her chest. The room around her felt far too still, the silence far too loud. She needed answers, but every click, every file only led to more questions. Who was this woman? Why had she been there, standing next to that man, so different from the last time? The woman in the video had been terrified. This woman, though, she wasn't afraid. Her gaze had been different, confident even. Was this all some kind of sick game? She grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling as she unlocked it. There were no new messages. No calls. Nothing. She quickly searched the man's name, but there was no information. It was like he didn't exist. And then, a chilling thought. What if the man was never who he seemed to be? What if the woman was never who she appeared to be? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that nothing in this room, in this house, felt real anymore. The familiar sights, the comforting routine, It all seemed alien now. The shadows in the corners of the room stretched longer with every passing moment, and every glance at the laptop sent a new wave of cold fear running through her veins. She shut it off again, her hands trembling uncontrollably. This had to be a mistake. This had to be some twisted, elaborate hoax. But then the phone buzzed in her hand. A message. She almost didn't want to look. But she did. It was a single line. You should have never opened it. The room suddenly seemed darker. The shadows were closing in. Her mind screamed for her to leave. To run. Danny. But her legs wouldn't move. Her thoughts were too tangled, too tied up in the mystery of it all. And deep down she knew she couldn't leave. Not now. There was no turning back now. She had seen it. She had felt it. Whatever this was, it was real. The message. The woman. The man. It was all connected. She stood up slowly, her legs weak beneath her, as if the weight of the situation had finally settled into her bones. She had to know. She couldn't live with this uncertainty any longer. She reached for the laptop again, her hands now steady. She clicked a new file. This time the video played without hesitation. No glitches, no distortion. The woman appeared on the screen. But this time, she was speaking. You don't know the truth, but you will. And then, just like that, the screen went black. Her heart stopped. Her mind raced. Was this a warning? Or was it a message? She was no longer afraid of what she might find. She was afraid of what she might lose. The steady hum of the laptop was now a constant companion in the room, like a heartbeat she couldn't escape. The mystery that had consumed her life for days, for weeks, was finally drawing her in, pulling her deeper into a world where truth and lies blurred into one. She clicked again. This time, the video was different. The image was clear from the start, no distortion, no static. The woman's face was calm but not empty. It held something, knowledge maybe, or a secret so heavy it pressed down on everything. Her voice came through soft but insistent. You don't understand yet, but you will. The words rang in her ears long after the video ended, echoing in the silence of the room. She didn't want to understand, but her mind wouldn't let her forget. There were layers to this, secrets buried deep under the surface. And she was getting too close. The sound of her breath filled the room, steady and shallow as she processed the words. It felt like the air itself was pressing down on her chest. You will understand. How? What was she supposed to understand? Why had the woman said that, and why had she looked at her so intently? It was then that something inside her shifted. The realization came slowly, like a door creaking open, the dark figure behind it now stepping into view. She had been chasing shadows all this time. The laptop. The videos. The woman. They weren't random pieces of some twisted game. No, it wasn't a game at all. The truth she had been running from was staring at her through the screen. She wasn't just involved in this story. She was the story. And everything that had happened. The man, the woman, the messages. It was all a reflection of her own choices, her own buried past. The screen went dark again, but it didn't matter anymore. She already knew the truth. It had always been there right in front of her. The connection. The pattern. The twisted thread that had tied her to all of this. It was a deep wound. Something old and forgotten. Something she had buried for years, but now it was emerging, clawing its way to the surface. She staggered back, stumbling over the chair behind her. Her hand gripped the edge of the desk as she tried to steady herself. Her heart was pounding in her ears, and for the first time in days, she didn't feel alone. She felt watched. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She was trapped. And there was no escape. You gave her away. The words whispered in her mind, over and over again, like a chant. The sentence that had been buried in her subconscious was now a truth she couldn't deny. She had given her away. Everything felt like it was happening in slow motion, a terrifying, inevitable unraveling. She walked to the window and stared out, but there was nothing to see. Just a blank, empty street. The world outside felt distant, disconnected from the storm raging inside her mind. How could she have been so blind? All this time she had thought she was the victim, the one being manipulated. But the truth was that she had been the architect of this nightmare. She had made the choices. She had played the part. The words repeated in her mind like a drumbeat, louder and louder until they became the only thing she could hear. You gave her away. Her breath hitched as the weight of it all settled in. She had abandoned someone. Someone she had once loved. The woman on the screen wasn't just some stranger. She was a part of her past. A part of herself she had rejected, hidden away. And now, she had to face the consequences. She knew what she had to do. There was no other choice. The truth had clawed its way out, and now she was left with the ruins of her own decisions. She turned back to the desk, her eyes locking onto the laptop. It was no longer a tool of discovery. It was a mirror reflecting everything she had tried to forget. She opened it one last time. The file was still there, the last unmarked entry. She clicked it, her heart pounding so loudly in her chest that it drowned out everything else. The screen flickered, and there she was again. The woman. The one she had abandoned. But this time, there was no fear in her eyes. Only understanding. Understanding that had been denied for far too long. The woman's voice was softer now, a whisper almost. You're not alone anymore. The screen went black. And for the first time she felt the weight lift. It was quiet now. Too quiet. The oppressive silence that had once felt like an obstacle now felt like a weight. It was as if the world around her had faded into the background, leaving her alone with the consequences of everything that had unfolded. The laptop sat in front of her, still closed, but its presence was undeniable. There was no escaping what it had revealed. She stood motionless in the center of the room, staring at the screen. The shadows were long, stretching across the floor as the evening light began to fade. It was as though the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for her to make the next move. But what was left to do? She had already uncovered the truth. The man, the woman, and the life she had once known, they were all part of a puzzle she had never wanted to solve. The past, buried deep within her, had come rushing back in a torrent. The choices she had made, the decisions that had shaped her life, had all led to this moment. There was no going back. The room felt smaller now. The walls were closing in, pressing against her from all sides. Each corner seemed to hold a secret, a whisper of the past that was too loud to ignore. She had made it this far, and yet there was a new fear taking root in her chest. It was a different kind of fear than before. It wasn't the terror of the unknown anymore, but the paralyzing realization that she had been complicit in everything that had happened. The woman in the videos had been a part of her life. A past life, one she had left behind. But now, the ties that bound her to that life were unbreakable. She had tried to run, tried to forget, but the truth wouldn't let her. It clung to her, suffocating her in its grip. And now, as the hours stretched on, the question she had been avoiding surfaced. What if she couldn't fix it? The sound of her own voice was strange, almost alien, as it echoed through the empty room. I have to do something. The words felt hollow, like a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. She stood and paced, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on her shoulders. She had to confront this, face it head on. But how could she fix something so broken? How could she undo the damage that had been done so long ago? She picked up the laptop again, her hands trembling. This time, there was no hesitation. She opened it, the screen blinking to life with a soft hum. The same file. 2024-419. This time there was no fear. Only determination. The woman's face appeared on the screen once more, but this time she was different. There was a calm in her eyes, a sense of acceptance. This was it. She had to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The video played out in front of her, But it was no longer just a video. It was a conversation, an unraveling of secrets long buried. The woman spoke, her voice now steady, clear. I was never lost. I was never gone. You chose to forget me. But I was always here. Always watching. The words hit like a slap to the face. They shattered the illusion she had carefully built around herself. All this time she had thought she was the victim, that the past had been something she could walk away from. But it was never that simple. The truth was uglier than she had imagined. She had given up on the woman in the videos, abandoned her in the dark recesses of her mind. But the woman had never left. She had been waiting, watching, knowing that one day the truth would come to light. And now it had. Her hands were shaking as she closed the laptop. The silence that followed was deafening. She had been expecting a release, a moment of clarity, but all she felt now was emptiness. The weight of what she had learned, what she had done, hung heavily in the air, suffocating her. There was no resolution. No answers that could undo the damage. She had hoped for something, some glimmer of redemption, but there was none to be found. What now? She stood in the center of the room, unsure of what to do next. The past had come crashing down, and all she had left was the wreckage. The world outside was as distant as it had ever been, and she was left alone with herself, with the choices she had made. In the end, there would be no healing, only knowing. She couldn't bring herself to touch the laptop again. It sat on the desk, waiting, like an invitation to further unravel the fragments of her mind. But something had changed. The urgency that once drove her to uncover the truth had faded into a dull, aching emptiness. She had seen everything, heard everything, and yet there was no satisfaction in knowing, no peace in understanding. Only the silence that felt louder than the videos ever had. Her mind wandered back to that moment when the woman had spoken on the screen. I was never lost. Those words haunted her. She had told herself a story for so long, one where she was the innocent, the victim of circumstance. But the truth had shattered that illusion. Now, she wasn't sure what she was anymore. Not a victim, but not a hero either. Just someone who had made choices. Choices that would never be undone. She stood up, the movement stiff, her legs weak from hours of sitting, thinking, waiting. The silence in the room was suffocating. It felt as though everything she'd known had been stripped away, layer by layer, until there was nothing left but the cold truth. She wandered to the window and looked out. The world outside hadn't changed. The street was quiet, the same as it had been when she first arrived here. But she had changed. The weight of the past pressed on her chest, each memory sharper than the last. For the first time, she allowed herself to admit something that had been clawing at her since the moment she clicked the first video. It was never about the woman on the screen. It had been about her, about what she had abandoned. And now, there was nothing to do but face it. The days had begun to blend together, a hazy fog of confusion and regret. She had tried to move on, to escape the thoughts that lingered at the edge of her consciousness, but they followed her everywhere. Every step, every breath. She opened her phone, half-heartedly scrolling through messages that no longer seemed important. The world outside, filled with its ordinary distractions, felt meaningless now. She had seen too much. She had crossed a line. And there was no turning back. The woman in the videos had never truly left her. She had only been hidden, buried beneath the surface of her own memories, waiting for the right moment to resurface. And now, with each passing day, she felt the truth creeping back into her life, pushing her to confront the things she had locked away for so long. One evening she sat at the desk, staring at the closed laptop. The silence in the room felt almost unbearable now, as if the device itself was waiting for her to open it. She knew what was inside. She had seen it all. But the question lingered, why couldn't she just leave it behind? The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in as she stared at the laptop. She reached out, hesitated, and then opened it. The screen flickered to life, but this time there was nothing. No file. No video. Just an empty screen. The feeling of being watched returned. A cold, creeping sensation at the back of her neck. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the empty screen. It felt like a warning, like the silence had become its own message. She slammed the laptop shut, but the feeling didn't go away. It lingered, a shadow that wouldn't leave. The world outside had become a blur. The days passed in a haze, indistinguishable from one another. The same routine. The same silence. But now, even the routine felt different. Every moment, every breath, was haunted by what she had seen, what she had known. She had thought that uncovering the truth would give her peace. But now, she knew that peace was something she would never find. The truth was too heavy, too painful. It had become a part of her, woven into the fabric of her life. There was no escaping it. In the end, she realized there was only one thing left to do. She had to let go. Let go of the past, the lies, and the woman who had once been her. The choices she had made could never be undone, but she could choose to move forward, even if it meant walking into the unknown. The world outside her window felt like it belonged to someone else. The city hummed with life, cars speeding down the streets, people moving from one place to another. But to her, everything was distant, as if she were watching it all from behind a thick glass. She had tried to move on, to go back to some semblance of normality, but the weight of her decisions kept pulling her back. The truth had become a silent companion, a shadow that followed her everywhere. The woman on the screen, the man, the choices she had made, they all hovered in the background of her life, no matter how hard she tried to push them away. She had thought that letting go was the key, but now she knew it wasn't that simple. Letting go didn't erase the past. It only left her with the knowledge that she could never be the same again. There was no escape. There was only the truth, and the constant ache of understanding it. The quiet of her apartment had become suffocating. The walls seemed to close in on her, and every creak of the floorboards felt like a reminder that she was still here, still trapped in this space, in this life. The laptop was gone now, discarded, hidden away, but the memories of what it had shown her lingered. She had tried to forget, tried to live as though nothing had changed, but the images, the words, they wouldn't leave her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them. Every time she let her mind wander, she heard them. You gave her away. That sentence had become the soundtrack to her life. It had etched itself into her consciousness, a constant reminder of the choices she had made. But as time passed, the meaning of those words began to shift. What if she hadn't given her away? What if she had just abandoned her? The days blurred together in a haze of dull routine. She went to work, she came home, she ate, she slept. But none of it felt real anymore. She was moving through the motions, but her mind was always elsewhere, caught in a loop of questions she couldn't answer. What did it mean? What did the truth mean? Could she ever truly understand it? Could she ever come to terms with what had been done, with what had been lost? The woman from the video, the one who had once been a part of her life, now seemed like a distant memory. But that was the problem. She wasn't distant. She was right there, always in the back of her mind. The silence of the apartment was deafening. She picked up her phone again, her fingers trembling as she scrolled aimlessly. There was no escape. The weight of everything, of the past and present, was too much to bear. The idea of facing the truth head-on terrified her. But she knew it was the only way to find peace, to move forward. There were no more distractions, no more running. The past was already here, waiting for her to confront it. And it wasn't going anywhere. She sat in front of the closed laptop, staring at it as though it held the key to everything. The screen was dark, but she could feel its weight, the unspoken tension hanging in the air. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, the familiar sensation of dread rising in her chest. But this time there was no hesitation. She opened it, her heart pounding in her chest, as though the simple act of turning it on would unleash everything she had been trying to avoid. The screen flickered to life. The file was there. The same one. She clicked it, knowing what she would see. But this time, she wasn't running. She was ready. The screen flickered, then steadied. The video began, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. There was the woman again, her face just as she remembered. But this time, there was something different. She wasn't alone. There was someone else in the room with her. The man. It was like looking into a mirror, but one that didn't reflect what she had hoped. It was staring her in the face, and this time there was no escaping it. The woman spoke again, her voice clear and steady. It was never about the past, it's about what you do now. The words settled deep inside her, like an anchor. She had been stuck in the past, trapped by guilt and regret, but the truth was that the only thing that mattered now was what she chose to do next. The video ended. The screen went black. And for the first time, she felt something close to peace. The truth had set her free, but at a price. The night had fallen, and the city outside was still. The air felt thick with the weight of the silence. She sat in the same spot, the same place she had sat for days, weeks now, trying to piece together everything she had learned. Her mind raced, thoughts scattered like puzzle pieces she couldn't quite fit together. The video had shown her the truth. But the truth didn't bring the clarity she had hoped for. It wasn't a clean slate, it was a reflection of everything she had tried to bury. The woman on the screen wasn't just a part of her past. She was a part of her that had been hidden, pushed away, forgotten. But not anymore. The truth had a way of clawing its way to the surface, no matter how deep you buried it. Now everything felt like a distant memory, and yet it was as if nothing had changed. She was still here, still trapped by the same choices, the same mistakes. She closed her eyes and let the stillness consume her. What was left? She had seen the video. She had heard the woman's words. The truth had been laid bare. There was no more running, no more hiding from the past. But now the question lingered, unanswered. What was she supposed to do with this truth? The world outside carried on, indifferent to her struggles. People walked the streets, oblivious to the silent war raging inside her. She had become a spectator in her own life, watching it unfold from a distance, unable to intervene, unable to change what had already been done. For so long she had been consumed by guilt, by shame. But guilt didn't give answers. It only kept her tethered to the past. And now, the woman's face, the man's presence, they no longer haunted her. They were just pieces of a puzzle she would never truly solve. It was as if she had been holding her breath for so long, waiting for something, anything, to change. But nothing did. The world outside remained unchanged. The city hummed, people moved, and yet she remained still, frozen in place, unable to move forward. The weight of the past had become too much to carry. She thought about the choices she had made, the decisions that had led her here, the life she had built, the people she had left behind. She had buried so much, tried to escape so many times, but it always came back. The truth, the reality of what had happened, always found a way to surface. And now, she couldn't escape it anymore. The truth wasn't something you could outrun. It wasn't something you could forget. It was always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The door creaked open. The sound was faint, almost unnoticed, but it was enough to snap her back to the present. She hadn't realized how long she had been sitting there. Her mind had wandered, lost in the labyrinth of her own thoughts. The weight of the truth had pushed everything else away. She glanced at the door, and then back at the laptop, still closed on the desk. Her heart beat a little faster now, not out of fear, but out of something else. Something like acceptance. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face the world again, but she knew she couldn't stay here forever. She couldn't live in the past. The woman's face, the man's shadow, they had taught her something important. They had shown her that the past could not be changed. But it didn't have to define her. What mattered now was what she chose to do next. And with that thought, she stood up, a sense of quiet resolution settling over her. She walked toward the door, her steps steady, each one a little heavier than the last. She wasn't running anymore. The truth had settled in, and there was no escaping it. It had carved its place in her life, but it no longer controlled her. As she stepped into the hallway, she paused, looking back at the room one last time. The laptop, the videos, the memories, they would always be there. But they didn't own her anymore. She had made her peace with them. She wasn't the same person who had walked into that room days ago. She had been broken, yes, but now she was whole again, not by forgetting the past, but by accepting it. She had survived. And as she walked out the door, leaving the shadows behind, she realized that this was the beginning of something new. Not redemption. Not a clean slate. But something more honest. The truth had cost her, but in the end, it had set her free.